Hello everyone, this is Adnan, PhD researcher in Action Lab of Faculty of IT, Monash University, Australia. I'll talk about our paper titled Record Keeping in Voice-Based Remote Community Engagement. An increasing proportion of community engagements, such as skill development initiatives, community building discussions, and training and awareness programs between NGOs and their target rural communities, are held remotely. This shift is often driven by practicality, cost considerations, environmental impact, and public health compliance. While parts of the world have been able to use internet-based technologies such as online video conferencing, many communities still rely exclusively on voice calls through traditional telephone systems for remote communication. Recognizing the crucial role of incorporating community dialogue in international development, as well as acknowledging the obstacles faced by communities lacking internet connectivity and literacy, voice-based media has gained considerable attention as a tool to support distributed community engagements, particularly in the Global South. However, one question remains to be explored: how the voice-based engagement records, including recordings, transcripts, facilitator notes, and interaction metadata. So how records obtained from these voice-based distributed community engagements can be moderated, preserved, utilized, and shared for community empowerment through sustainable knowledge gain. To this end, this paper aims to investigate the requirements, concerns, and existing record-keeping practices of domestic workers and NGOs through a series of stakeholder FGDs, thus providing insights and recommendations for the development of record-keeping approaches tailored to voice-based remote community engagement records. The research study took place in Dhaka, capital city of Bangladesh. The research was conducted in collaboration with Nari Maitri, meaning Women's Solidarity, in their official space as a venue. Nari Maitri works with one of the most marginalized and underrepresented communities, domestic workers, based in Dhaka, to assist them in securing jobs and alleviating literacy barriers. There are around 10.5 million domestic workers in Bangladesh, and 90% of them are female workers. Domestic workers, mostly living below the poverty line, come to Dhaka from different parts of Bangladesh in search of job. They mainly reside in slum areas to afford the living costs in Dhaka, have very poor living conditions, and are deprived of labor rights. During COVID-19, most of Narimuitri's community engagement activities were conducted remotely over the phone call, for example, group calls. The study involved 18 stakeholder participants in total, 9 domestic workers and 9 NGO staff who host and facilitate different engagement activities with domestic workers. The table shows demographics of the participants. The NGO facilitators were from 2 different NGOs, Oxfam and Narimitri. The literacy level of domestic workers was mixed, although the NGO staffs were all well literate. So the domestic workers, some of them could fairly read and write, some could just write their names and signatures, and some of them were completely illiterate. The research activities included three 2-hour long workshops. First one with facilitators only, second one with domestic workers only, and the third one with both facilitators and domestic workers. The facilitator only workshop, or workshop 1, concentrated on realizing the existing record-keeping practices of NGOs and overall perception of facilitators on collection and use of records. The domestic worker only workshop, or workshop 2, focused on the domestic workers' perceptions and awareness regarding the records generated as part of their engagements with NGO facilitators. The third and final workshop, which combined participants from both stakeholder groups, aimed to dig deeper into the disparities in attitudes and opinions between these two parties, as well as identifying points of consensus to inform implications for voice-based platforms that can bridge their differing perspectives. The discussion included different records such as audio recordings, transcripts, and facilitator notes of the engagements. This focus on voice-based engagements and related record-keeping implications was motivated by their potential to empower distributed communities as well as the imperative of cultural sensitivity and inclusivity, particularly concerning marginalized communities like domestic workers. All three workshops involved scenario-based FGDs in small groups of 3 to 6 persons. For instance, the third workshop included group discussions among both parties, so groups of 6 were formed of 3 participants from each party. The scenarios were all closely related to domestic workers' lived experiences. For data analysis, reflexive thematic analysis was conducted as the workshop activities facilitated discussions on participants' lived experiences and perceptions around record keeping. To give an example of the scenarios in workshop 3, there were 4 scenarios to discuss in each group. The first scenario was on how to access the transcripts and amend if any discrepancy is found. The second scenario was on group calls and moderation process for call recordings. The third one was on access to audio recordings, particularly when the primary verification identity, say the original phone number, is lost. And the fourth scenario focused on amendment of audio recordings. So each scenario was prompted with follow-up discussions, follow-up questions. Refer to the paper for further details on the workshop activities and scenarios. We will now discuss some interesting findings of this study. Both parties agreed on the positive value of records in their lives. They even valued records of follow-up meetings of the original ones. For facilitators, records embodied tangible proof of their active participation for reporting purpose, while for domestic workers, records were valuable as reference for future opportunities and verification purposes. This is why domestic workers wanted their records to be preserved as long as possible, whereas facilitators preferred up to project's lifespan due to obvious resource constraints. Besides, participants endorsed the preservation of both hard copy transcripts and audio recordings for long-term storage. Domestic workers even challenged the literacy barrier as they were happy to manage reading records, for example, transcripts, by taking them to someone who could read if necessary. Regarding record access, an agreed option was implementing a PIN-based system where each recording was protected by a 4-digit passcode. Despite pragmatic concerns like older participants struggling to remember passcodes, a solution was also suggested, like writing down the password in participants' preferred language if necessary. Domestic workers showed an interesting approach, like self-recording in own phone to ensure record access for verification and reference purposes, which may lead to more serious privacy issue, and this needs to be considered while designing or developing solutions or systems. Regarding record sharing, participants highlighted consideration of socio-cultural sensitivity and separate consent process before sharing. Importantly, creation of recording summary is encouraged for sharing to ensure sustainable consumption of recordings by a broader audience. Considering the unique challenges in voice-based engagement, the discourse also progressed towards record amendment approaches in terms of the practical implementation of amendment mechanisms. Participants demonstrated a strong awareness of technological possibilities. They proposed practical suggestions for amendments, leveraging telephony-based solutions like re-recording and sending it over a phone call. Participants fervently advocated for a collaborative decision-making process that involved all relevant parties in the decision-making. They also acknowledged pragmatic challenges in doing so, such as operational barriers due to hierarchical constraints, for example, needing approval from the line manager, and also resource constraints, like they may not have enough human resource or time, which again highlight recommendations and implications for potential digital solutions to to mitigate manual labor. We will discuss some key takeaways from this study. One of the key takeaways from this study is designing to support stakeholders agency. To support stakeholders agency effectively, we argue that it is imperative to develop record-keeping processes that demonstrate transparency to stakeholders by keeping participants explicitly aware of and actively involving them in each stage of the record-keeping processes, starting from collection to disposal of records. We argue that such a shift towards more participatory and inclusive record-keeping practices can be potentially facilitated by leveraging voice-based platform. For example, voting or polling using interactive voice response or IVR technology. Stakeholder community participants also emphasized the need for ethical considerations like clear consent, transparency, and confidentiality regarding record keeping. We propose that voice-based platforms can offer a time-efficient and cost-effective solutions in streamlining these processes. For instance, voice-based platforms can facilitate follow-up asynchronous engagements for taking consent from participants about sharing, before sharing. For example, an IVR menu like press 1 to share with family members only, press 2 for public sharing, and press 3 for sharing with yourself only. Similarly, regarding amendments, participants can first record their amendments, then send them through using a 4-digit PIN. Subsequently, amendments can undergo an approval process through either synchronous and asynchronous, IVR, etc. Another takeaway is the crucial role of facilitators. For instance, facilitators are key to effective consent mechanisms, including tailoring consent messages to the cultural and linguistic nuances of marginalized communities, and thus designing appropriate IVR manuals. Also, facilitators need to apply human judgment to address intricacies of voice-based engagement, such as carefully introducing participants while also maintaining anonymity before starting the meeting or live session. Also, recording on, off, or pause or resume controls, considering the context of the discussions. So they need to apply human judgments. Hence, facilitators mediate between participants and voice-based platforms, ensuring dynamic consent, context, alternative mediums, content creation, transparency, and flexibility in participatory. Our paper does not mandate a rigid framework for participatory record-keeping approaches, including the consent mechanism. Instead, it offers ethical considerations and strategies for voluntary adoption by organizations such as NGOs. We strongly anticipate that our contributions will improve the effectiveness of participatory record keeping in voice-based engagements involving communities and NGOs, thus resulting in increased collaboration, productivity, and ultimately community empowerment. Thank you.